Mayoral Memo with Mathew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Now, a man that's been back in my old stamping ground of Hobart, 14 minutes to 8 right now, by the way. Hobart is Dubbo Mayor Mathew Dickerson. Good morning, sir.
I mentioned your name and I got a few strange stories that were told to me. I won't repeat them on air.
Well, there'll be some strange stuff come out of there, I have to tell you. Oh, okay, now listen, what was it? A National Roads Conference, is that right?
Yeah, National Roads Congress. This is the Australian Local Government Association annual congress about roads. They haven't held it the last couple of years, as so many things, obviously, with COVID. But it was a pretty important one to come back to because there is so much damage that has occurred to roads, mainly along the eastern seaboard, but certainly across the nation. There were a lot of discussions about the roads. In fact, it prompted two emergency motions and media releases to come out from two other organisations. Local Government New South Wales put out an emergency motion and media release, and Country Mayors Association put out something similar with an emergency motion about roads, just because we are struggling so much, Kerry, with road infrastructure, road damage, and it's just everywhere you go across the eastern seaboard. Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, all are in that similar situation with their roads in so much of a state of disrepair.
Yeah, and while, you're talking about $50 million released by the state government, which is very nice of them, might add to, but it doesn't go very far over 95 councils, does it?
It is a problem. I did talk to Sam Farraway, the Minister for Regional Roads and Transport, and I said, thank you very much. We'll take $50 million any day, but you're right. In the scheme of things, that might mean a bit over $500,000 for each of those councils approximately. But to give you some idea of some sort of context, our budget this year is to spend $28 million on our roads, and our infrastructure backlog we estimated before this latest series of rain events was $40 million. So $500,000 is nice, and I'll take it every day, but it doesn't put a huge dent in the problem that we have.
Now, some news this morning. No NRL game?
No NRL game for Dubbo next year. We had some discussions with some clubs. South Sydney obviously played in Dubbo last year and this year. Part of the issue is that you've got to pay a lot of money for an NRL game. Now, South in particular, $350,000 is the going rate. I know other teams, for example, Panthers, are more than that, but South Sydney, $350,000. We went, and sorry, that's a bit of a tough ask for the ratepayers of a community to fork out to a fairly rich NRL club. The job had been made much easier because the state government had come in last year and said, we'll give you $150,000 towards that figure, which was fantastic. So that was a 2-year agreement we had with South Sydney. They played last year and this year. In February this year, Council resolved that we go back to the state government and say, can we have some money guaranteed for future years so we don't have to put all that burden onto ratepayers? So we asked the state government that. We sent them an official letter, and they came back and said, we're not sure, we'll think about it, maybe, maybe not. So it was hard for us to go forward with confidence with that amount, keeping in mind that even after that $150,000, we paid the additional $200,000 to South Sydney. We still lost another $67,000 on the game this year, for example, and that's, again, coming out of the ratepayers' pockets. So we couldn't get any guarantee from the state government going forward, so we basically did go and have some discussions with some other clubs, but it's a pretty tough ask when we've got to fork out all that money to come to some sort of reasonable agreement. We'll keep looking at ways to go forward, but at the moment, no NRL game for next year.
Right, now you've got a Mayoral podcast.
I think a podcast is a bit like radio in that it's a great way to get information out to the community. Obviously with you, Kerry, I get 5 or 6 minutes, and most radio stations it's about the same. There's so much information to explore that I thought I'd start a podcast. So we're a few weeks into it so far. We're getting reasonable numbers of listeners, but it's just a way to spend about an hour. I've got a host that I've got along that we just talk about council activities, what's happened in the last week for an hour. And again, the feedback's been pretty good, but just not enough listeners so far. So we'll see how we go, getting more and more people to listen to that. If you're interested in it, go to your favourite podcast app and search for Mayoral Memo with Mathew Dickerson, and you'll find that podcast.
Okay, now, hydrogen plant, what investigations in this?
We've actually had a proponent buy some land on Yarrandale Road, which is some industrial land there. And the idea with hydrogen is that often it's not the greatest way to produce some other power because it takes a fair bit of energy to produce the hydrogen. If you're using coal-fired power, that's not great. But this particular proponent said that we've got so much renewable energy around our area with a renewable energy zone. When there's excess power from solar or excess power from wind, rather than having that go nowhere, using it to produce hydrogen makes sense. And they'll use this hydrogen for a few things. First thing they'll do is they'll mix it with natural gas and use that to produce power. But long term, they'll eventually get to the stage where it'll be 100% hydrogen used in a power plant. And of course, the outcome or the output from that is just water, so it's great for the environment. But you'll also find that we'll have trucks going up and down the Newell that'll be hydrogen trucks, and they'll need somewhere to refuel. The Arundel Road is just off the Newell Highway, so it'll be easy for those trucks to come in and fuel up there. And one of the things that we talked about last week at the National Roads Congress is already we've got some hydrogen cars being used by the ACT government and also by the Queensland government. So we'll see hydrogen cars around as well, so they need somewhere to refuel. Early days for the hydrogen plant at this stage, but the proponents came along and gave a presentation just a couple of weeks ago to Council. Sounds pretty exciting.
All right. Thank you for that, sir. Good to catch up again.
Always my pleasure, Kerry.
We'll talk to you later.
Mayoral Memo with Mathew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.